Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Magical Theory, we are going to be discussing how to haunt a house. And not in the idea of how to bring a ghost into your home, but rather how to become a ghost to survive death. Now, why would one want to become a ghost? There are a few reasons one might want to do this. For my purposes, surviving death is the key aspect of what I am discussing here. Now understand, we are not talking about defeating death, but rather surviving it. Now what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, by maintaining a presence on the material plane in between lives, and creating an imprint on the material plane, we are able to store information and memories of our previous self that will then be reunited with the higher self when we return back down to the material plane in the reincarnation cycle. So the idea here is to create more cohesion in between lives. Now theoretically, one could use this idea to prolong the period in between lives, but eventually you're going to need to reincarnate. Yeah? So this isn't a way to avoid death or, again, defeat death. We are not defeating death. We are surviving death. We are still working within its cycle. That is a very large will. You don't want to try and turn away from the will of death or try and turn it backwards because there's too much momentum there. We need to work within that system. But this is a way of leaving, theoretically, this is a way of leaving memories and part of your astral form on the material plane so it is available to you when you are reborn. One could also use this power theoretically for guarding your ancestral line, whatever it is that you feel you want to protect. There is an unfinished business aspect to this that could be used as well. Just like, that's the cliche for ghosts, right, is that they have unfinished business, and so that's why they come back. Perhaps there is some business that you have that you feel you could only accomplish as a ghost, so when you die, you'd be able to then complete that unfinished business. Now, before we go any farther, I do want to say that there is no reason to end things prematurely for this type of idea. That is not what we're talking about here. The longer you live, the more of an impression you're able to create on the material plane, the more time you have to work on your anchor points. So this is something we want to just go ahead and die naturally and be prepared for this when it occurs so that we can have as much time to create anchor points as possible. Okay, so what are anchor points? Okay, that's one of the primary things that you need to have in order to create a haunting. But before we get more into that, let's get into this idea of the material plane, astral plane, and the mental plane. There are three planes on which we exist, yeah? And we exist in all three states at all times. This isn't something where when you die, you actually are removed from the material plane. It is rather your primary focus becomes on the astral realm rather than the material realm. Just like right now, while you're awake and alive, your primary focus is most often on the material realm, the physical world right in front of you. Yeah? Okay. And when you die, or when you go into dreams, because it's very similar, it's basically the same place. You are being focused on, your primary focus of perception is on the astral plane, and that is what we want to be able to change, is change our focus so that even though we exist on the astral plane primarily, we're able to shift our perception and interaction to the material plane while we are in between lives. And to be able to store imprints down there. And perhaps even work with practitioners that are still alive. That's part of what we'll be getting into here in just a little bit. But anyways, okay, so now that that has been established, what we are doing with these anchor points is creating imprints where our energy is essentially stored or rooted, anchored to these points. This is actually something people are quite aware of with ghosts, You know, that's why a ghost haunts a particular area. That's that's where its anchor points are. Even on some of these ghost shows, I mean, most of those are kind of silly in my opinion. But there is one where a guy takes items where he finds the ghost's anchor point, and then he takes them back. I'm not vouching for that guy that he's real, but that is a legitimate technique. If you find the anchor points and remove them, then the ghost, well, it's been removed from that area, unless of course it has anchor points in the walls and in the ground. So you don't want to leave, the point of that story really is you don't want to leave your anchor points on objects that can be moved around. Well, maybe some of them, but you want to have multiple anchor points. And how do we create these anchor points? There are a few ways to do this, and we should probably take advantage of all of these techniques as much as we can. Okay, so the most obvious is a personal sigil. Yeah, I've discussed this in previous videos, creating a sigil that represents you as a symbol. And this is, just like a spirit has. Many of your spirits have sigils, which you use to summon them. This is, in this context, personal sigil is very much the same idea. It's just like when you write that sigil on an area, you are creating an anchor point, essentially, for the spirit you're trying to work with, and it can come down from that anchor point to interact with you. This is the same thing, but you're creating the anchor point. Yeah? And so that means drawing drawing small versions of your personal sigil in areas that you want to haunt. Ideally, you would at least start this process with a little bit of blood magic. Now, I'm not talking about cutting oneself deeply. Just get like a diabetic pin, something like that, prick your finger, get the blood, and then draw your sigil with the intent that it is linked to your blood, with the intent that it is outflowing, that your energy is outflowing into your sigil, from your sigil, yeah? So that you get that connection, that material connection to your actual ka or aura, the energetic equivalent of your material form. That's what we're trying to connect to here, which I've called the aura or the ka in the past. But what it is it's the energy that is created by the interaction between your astral form and your actual physical body. And that's the part that we want to preserve here. So we make a sigil with the blood, linking it to this concept. And then you want to draw your sigil anywhere where you want to be able to create an anchor point. And then during your lifetime, you will focus on these anchor points occasionally. I discussed in previous videos, during your lifetime, you actually can use these points to remote view or astral project to those areas. That is something that you want to be doing, well, to check on those areas. It's an interesting exercise in and of itself, but that is something that you want to be doing to strengthen the anchor points. And these are also places you want to be going back to frequently and interacting with the place with the intent of leaving a recording of your energy. So just walking around and imagining that each step is creating a recording within the energy of the place. That's how a lot of what we call repeater ghosts are. They're just that recording. So that is something that is already existing. We know that's there, and we're trying to create memory. Trying to create memory in the place of us so that it is more conducive to us coming there after we die. So we want to be coming there physically. We want to be astral projecting to these places often. Ideally, if you have a permanent residence, you would be also, of course, doing this in your home or temple, whatever you have. But the point here is creating the anchor points. If you have somewhere permanent where you can continually interact with that space on a regular basis up until you die, that is ideal. And we can make these sigils with the blood more often that way as well, because those are more potent. And when you use your own blood with that intent of creating, because if because it links more strongly. You can just draw them in ink, or even not even have to physically do it, but just, energy trace them if it's somewhere where you feel it wouldn't be okay to leave a sigil. So we leave the sigils, we create the imprints with walking in the area, doing other things in the area, perhaps playing music in the area. Sound, yeah, that seems to be the thing that is recorded the most by places, is sound. That's the thing we hear most with these repeater type ghosts. Now, repeater ghosts, they are just a memory from the place. And these can continue for a long time. There's not really a soul involved there, other than the soul of the place itself remembering the sound. But again, we can take advantage of this and make the area more conducive to our entrance by creating these repetition, these memories within the place of walking around, playing music, whatever it is that you choose to do. I often do whistles or my little hand thing. I do that because it's something that's fairly unique to me, something that creates an identifiable link, something unique. Okay, so that's only one side of this, yeah? Preparing the place and creating anchor points. You can do these all over the place. I recommend creating multiple anchor points in various locations if you're going to do this. Now, as I said, this isn't something that I have any previous experience with, so I don't know if you would be stuck only being able to interact with these anchor points that you've created, or if they are simply being able to make you come down and interact with the material plane. I do hope that by the time I die, that there will be people there that will actually work with me after death through my sigil, essentially summoning me like any other spirit, and that should also aid in this process. But let's get on to the next part in this, and that is how to prepare yourself for this, because there are a few things you need to do in order to complete this process at the moment of death. Okay, so like I said, there is an energetic equivalent of your material form, and this is essentially what part of you that can become the ghost. This is your Ka. When we inflate a Ka, like in the video with Boris, the cash cow sigil, the steward, in that video I discuss inflating the Ka. And we're going to be inflating our own Ka, that energetic equivalent. Now, there are two ways that one can go about this. If we, at the very moment of death, and this is where a lot of your conscious ghosts come from, is that at the moment of death, just as they die, they have some thought that pulls them back into their body and reignites that Ka energy. Like the cliche I've already mentioned, unfinished business. Something that they go, oh no, well I have to do this, and they pull back from the astral plane and back into that Ka and reanimate it. But they're never prepared for this, and they don't have prepared anchor points, so that's some example of how it works. That's a place for us to start from. Now, these aren't the only types of self-aware ghosts that exist, though. The ones that immediately transfer into their Ka, they have lost their fuel source, essentially. So if you go that route, it is perhaps one of the most sure routes, because you're going to be stuck on the material plane from the beginning, but you will need to absorb more energy. That's where you get a lot of these idea of hungry ghosts, is these ones that haven't gone up and then come back down. And then you also have ghosts that aren't on the material plane all the time. Yeah, their primary focus isn't trapped on the material plane, but they come back down into your dreams. Some of these ghosts, we seem to be interacting on the material plane to the point they can move things around. But what they're doing is going up to the astral plane and then returning somehow with some type of anchor points. The most common way that we see this is these anchor points are on people. Often we have this idea of family members coming back to check on us. And these are spirits that have crossed over and then come back down. So what we want to do is have those anchor points, have that Ka ready for us. And then we can use the S1 sigil as our base and simply have a portal at your dream platform, which I'll put a video to that here. And what your dream platform is essentially your own personal astral space that you have created. And if we have already prepared on our dream platform some kind of doorway which will open up to those anchor points, then we can go up to the astral so that we complete the cycle and then open the door to our sigils and come back down and reanimate your Ka, thereby achieving a ghost status and possibly being able to simply come back and forth as one chooses, which is hopefully the goal here. My intent, like I said, is to survive death by working through this method, and then between this life and the next, I would like to continue working with the Sorcerers Guild. So this is a very long-term project, and hopefully I'll be able to achieve this. Of course, hopefully we're not going to find out for a very long time how well it works. Anyways, that will be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.